Hey, good afternoon, Katie.
Hi, Jason.
How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm so excited to have you. I was thinking about and we'll talk about this in a minute. I was thinking about how we reconnected, and I realized I'm like, oh, Katie, she'd be a great person to have on. You have so many cool things that you talk about and you work on, and some awesome life experience. So I'm honored to have you on as a guest today. So thank you for being here as well.
Yeah, I'm
So
delighted.
yeah, so with that, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, who you are, where you are in the world, and a little bit about yourself.
All right, well, terrific. My name is Katie Fogarty. I'm coming to you from Long Island, New York. I wear several different career hats, and I know that we'll talk about how we met. We met through my company called the Reboot Group, which is a career communications consultancy. I work with senior executives, leaders, teams at companies and organizations to make them more effective at telling their professional story. Because when you can tell your professional story well, you can better advocate for your career, your company, your priorities, and your impact. And I also teach a class at General Assembly, which is an education
Hmm.
management company in New York City. I teach a class on LinkedIn and how to put it to work to share your professional story. And that's how we first met. You were one of my
Yeah,
students, and then
I
you wound
was.
up, becoming a client, and we got to work
Yes.
together, which was great.
Yeah.
But my other career hats, I write a career column for a company called Brightly, which is a direct to membership company for people in the 50 plus demographic. And
Hmm.
a new project that I'm excited about is my own podcast. I just launched a
Nice.
show called A Certain Age, which is a series for women on life after 50.
Okay. So I knew you were launching a podcast, but we hadn't talked about it. So I'm just going to clarify that I am not in your target market on either of those two things. Not
but
yet.
you,
Someday
but
I
you
will
will
be
be
in one of
someday.
those. Will
Exactly.
God
It's a good
willing, I think the term is. Yes, absolutely.
it's a good club. It has a massive PR problem. I think people think of turning 50 as the end of the line, but I'm here to report from the post 50 front that there's a lot of vibrancy in that chapter.
my I'm trying to think what my dad told me. He told me that I think he said his 50s were his favorite decade. Maybe because we were all out of the house and he was like free again. I don't know. But
Yeah,
yeah, he said it's great.
well, I think they talk about how the most unhappy. I've seen a data point on this. That the most unhappy part of your life is in your 40s, which makes a
Great.
lot of sense. You're kind of crunched in your career. You're like
Yeah.
building your family. You have like multiple stresses. But by the 50s, I think you have like a very clear sense of who you are. You've built a career, and your kids are, they require a little bit less of you. They're more enjoyable, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's so interesting that the studies that I have seen is say that you also maximize your earnings in your 40s, and as you maximize your earnings, you also have the least amount of happiness.
Sure.
Not
Yep.
not really surprised by that at all, actually. But
It's a lot of
that's a
work making money.
it's a lot of work making money, especially in your 40s. Most people who have children, they have them in they have like you said, like kids of all ages in their 40s. So most people, they have children, have them in the house in their 40s at some age or another,
Yeah, the
whether it
juggle
be
is real. The juggle is
whether
absolutely real.
whether it be some people like myself who's about to have another child in his early 40s, or somebody like you who's like we were talking about, you sent one off to college and got a couple others that are still with you. So life, it's all life.
Yeah, Jason, there's nothing better than a new baby. It's an incredible amount of work, but it's so
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah, yeah. Yep. No, we're excited. It's a he is on the way shortly. So let's get into it, Katie. So let's talk about our first impressions of each other. And I usually have my guests go first, but I'm going to go first on this one. So I remember taking that class at General Assembly, and it wasn't in the normal classrooms. And I don't remember, did they have like a power outage or something?
Yeah, there was a
That
gas explosion
A gas
outside that
explosion.
closed the block
Right.
for several days.
Right. I remember that. Oh my God. That was so. And I was thinking about this. I think it was like almost exactly 2 years ago. I think it was in September of 2018, if I'm not mistaken. We're recording this in September of 2020, I believe.
Good,
And
good memory.
I think so. Well, this is what happens in your 40s. You keep your memory, I guess, when
Not
sorry, too
always.
easy. True, true. But yeah, I remember my first impression of you was like actually as the instructor. And I remember that you were very approachable. And I specifically remember your introduction around how you'd spent a lot of time. Then we're going to talk about this in media specifically. If I'm not mistaken, you were actually a reporter.
Yes, I have I've got a master's in broadcast journalism. I used
Right.
to, I've worked in several different media. I worked for CNN Financial News. I was on one of their tech shows, behind the scenes there, sort of in production. I used to
Yeah.
write the morning news at New York One. I wrote the
Uh-huh.
morning news for a couple of years there. And I did report stories, but for a smaller news company called Patch, which is a
Gotcha.
network of hyper local news sites owned by AOL.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. So I remember that your presence was, it was something like a reporter, and I mean that in a good way. Like you had a good presence on there. And I also remember you referring to something around age, and I don't remember what you said exactly, but you referred to something about how you felt like you were really coming into your own as you actually got a little bit older, which totally makes sense as we're going to talk about today. So my first impression of you is like likable, bright, and had a good presence in front of us as an instructor. So that was my first impressions of you. And I had to dig in the memory banks a little bit because 2 years ago to remember a first impression of each other is a little bit digging, but I think I got there.
Well, thank you, Jason. And actually do remember that class well. We were in a stunning classroom
Oh,
overlooking
stunning.
Lower Manhattan, and it was, 14-foot floor to ceiling windows overlooking New York Harbor. You could see the Statue of Liberty, and it was just a beautiful spot to be teaching a class. And I do remember we connected, and then we stayed in touch afterwards over LinkedIn, which is amazing because it's a great tool for staying connected to people that are, even on just sort of the periphery of your professional orbit. And then I think it was about a year later, you reconnected and said, I am looking to potentially look for a new job, and I really want to polish my profile. And then you came on and we worked together. You were one of my clients.
Yep, exactly. Yeah,
So
no,
this
that
is my
is
impression
correct.
of you, I guess. That you were, at the time, you were working in sales, and I remember
Yep.
thinking that you were so well suited to that job. And I think there are, my impression of salespeople, they sort of fall into two camps: like people who are really excited and like are always selling and always closing, and then there are people who just really are people. They enjoy
Yep.
connecting. They're just like naturally interested in people, and you fell into that category of just somebody who is like warm and interested in other people, which then makes you interesting. And I could see why you were so successful as a salesperson. And it was
Yeah.
really no surprise when we worked together as a client that you shared that you wanted to transition to coaching.
Yeah.
That which seems to be such a great fit for your skill set of just of really looking, out for people, being interested in what matters to them, and helping them
Yeah.
achieve their goals. So I'm delighted that you made that leap.
Oh, thank you, Katie. I'm blushing over here.
And it's great. It's
So,
great set of. It makes you a good podcaster, right? You have to be
yeah.
curious about other people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You have to be interested in other people to make this type of line work.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you, Katie. So, now we're going to make this all about you. Well, not all
Let's
about
do
you. I'll
it.
probably I'll probably insert myself in some places. But
Let's
yeah,
make it
if you're
about
like, if you're like
let's make it about the audience. What does the
about the
audience want to hear?
audience. Yeah, what does the audience want to hear? For the audience members, if you could write in after listening to this episode when it comes out and tell us what you want to hear about, we'll have to come back around and do it again. Not a radio show, just to remind everybody, a podcast, recorded podcast. So, Katie, the first question I have for you is, what is something that you nerd out about?
I love this question. I nerd out about so many things. So it changes. I think I really nerd out about learning new things. And
Hmm.
for example, a couple of years ago, it was tennis. I got really obsessed with tennis. I was on a summer team in my town, and then I loved it so much that I started taking multiple lessons and joined an indoor league. And I played during the winter. I watched endless TV. I actually read books about tennis. So I really
Wow.
nerded out about that. But what I'm doing now is I'm nerding out about podcasts. I'm really
Hmm.
excited about dipping my toe in these waters. I meant to do it for a couple of years. And COVID really gave me this sort of shelter in place time to think more deeply about it, to do a lot of reading about it. So that's my new obsession, is learning about podcasting.
Yeah. What's the most interesting thing you've learned about podcasting so far?
I've learned that it's really tricky on the technical front. I
Hmm.
have it's there's so much wonderful technology. I'm hosting my podcast on Buzzsprout, which is really
Me too.
oh, you really? Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I
So
love Buzzsprout. Yeah.
it's wonderfully seamless.
Oh, it's great.
you can upload the audio file. I turn stuff into transcripts very simple, quickly and easily through it. But there's just, a million little details that it's not just the recording. It's like, where are you hosting it? How are you promoting it? How are you getting on all the different directories? Getting it accepted into Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Stitcher, and a host of directories I've never even heard of. So it's been, talking to the guest which is the part that's sort of visible or audible rather to your listener.
Yeah.
It seems like that's podcasting, but there's probably 20 to 30 things that need to happen, before and after, to really get the show in front of somebody. So that's been eye-opening. It's more than just having a great conversation with somebody.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And since you have an interview podcast, and this is obviously an interview podcast, in Buzzsprout, you can look at your numbers of downloads. And what I realize is there's a direct, almost 2-to-1 correlation when the guest also markets the episode versus just me markets the episode. And I market it through LinkedIn, through Facebook, and through Instagram. And so, for example, when your episode comes out, if you also put it on, on the channels that you're on, it's almost a doubling of the listeners per episode. And I can actually look and go like, oh yeah, that person didn't market it. Oh, that person did a great job of marketing, and you can actually see the difference just like purely in the numbers.
Yes, you got to put your guests to work, and
I put your guests to work.
I do. I think I might have mentioned at the top of the show that I do a career feature 2 to 3 times a month for a company called Brightly. And when I do a feature, we talk about one theme, and I have 5 different guests, and it's all written. They submit their short quote that is about the topic of the week. And when I follow up with each of those guests and provide them suggested copy about how they can share it on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Like, I literally write text and say, here's some text that you might want to customize for yourself. Here's a bit.ly link to the actual media on the website, and here's an image for social sharing.
Wow.
I make it easy for the guest to kind of hit the easy button and do the sharing. So I'm passing that idea along to you. But again, that's like that's one of the 30 pieces of things I have to do to get the content in front of people. Yeah.
So what? Just to geek on podcasts for one more minute. 2 days ago, I went through and I removed all my episode numbers for my title. You don't need to do that anymore. At least on Apple, it automatically gets episode numbers. Yes. And on the other platforms, you don't really need to do it anymore, because in Apple, it actually doubles it. It'll say like episode 4. And then if it's number 4 in the title, it will actually like show you 2 4s in the title, which looks strange. And the other thing, or if you notice this, is Spotify finally introduced HTML show notes.
Got it.
Yeah, which is cool, because previous to, like when you look at show notes on like Apple Podcasts or something, it looks great. Previous to like, it must have been a month ago, Spotify, it was just one big ugly chunk of text. It was horrible. But they obviously, they've been investing heavily in podcasts, so they've had somebody figure that out. And now it looks great.
I'll have to do that. I had not been putting my show notes. I have 3 shows live right now, and I haven't been putting show notes into the directories themselves. I am in the process of finishing my website, and I'm hosting them there. But now that you've shared that with me, I think I need to go revisit that and see if having show notes in the actual directories would make a difference.
Yeah, very good. All right.
We could
probably talk about podcasting the rest of the time. But we won't, because that will be boring for the audience. So what is something that is inside your comfort zone that might be outside of somebody else's?
So, Jason, I listened to your podcast that you did a couple of months ago, and you had a wonderful woman named Ms. on, and she talked about being this Airbnb host. And I thought it was like the craziest story of having strangers show up in her 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, how she was so comfortable with that. And I was like, I don't have a story like that.
Yeah.
What am I going to talk about? And, what I feel that I'm comfortable with that a lot of people aren't is public speaking. And I know that feels like a cliche. A lot of people say that. But I'm sharing that because I really feel like for any one of your listeners who's thinking, I'm terrible at public speaking, I don't want to do that, I don't like it, I would say, even though it's in my comfort zone now, it wasn't always. And that I, spoke to a friend of mine who does a lot of big stage public speaking events, and she'll be in front of 4 or 5, 10,000 people. And I remember saying to her at one point, well, that's just because you're so naturally good at it. And she stopped me
Hmm.
and said, nope, no
Nope.
one is naturally good at being on a big stage. No one's naturally good at engaging an audience. It takes work. You have to learn these skills. And
Yeah.
like a light bulb had gone off. And I put the work in. So I'm sharing this just to say, for anyone who's thinking like public speaking is never going to be in my comfort zone, not true. You can hire a coach. You
Yeah.
can practice on smaller stages in smaller rooms, and you can build your confidence. And so I share that. Public speaking is in my wheelhouse now, but it wasn't always.
Yeah, I've got two things to share on that, or two observations. So it's interesting that people will say to those who are good at public speaking, "Oh, you're such a natural." You would never say that to like a theater actor of like, "Hey, Lin-Manuel Miranda, you're such a natural that you just got up and played Alexander Hamilton the first time." Like rehearsal for months, if not like people rehearse for months for these shows
Years.
in the theater. Years.
It took him years to get to that moment in his career.
Exactly. And then the second thing I want to say is I went through a public speaking training program a couple years ago. Had a lot of guests on my show have come from friendships there. And the person who runs that, his name is Michael and Amy Porter. They run it together. Michael was like a top keynote speaker back in the day. He doesn't do it anymore, but he was, I don't know exactly what he was getting, but he was on large stages getting paid like multiple five figures for these things. He told us that he had his keynote, like his go-to speech that he would sell. He said it took him about 1,000 hours between writing and rehearsing to ever have it in front of an audience that paid him for it. 1,000 hours. It's a
That's
lot.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
And that goes from the first time you sit down and concept it up to have it like they call it like a sellable speech, and 1,000 hours. So, and he's already an actor, but even he would say like, it doesn't matter if you're the world's best actor. It's all about the practice. So I'm with you. And I think that goes for almost anything in life. Like, oh, you're such a natural. It's like the over the 10-year overnight success,
Yes,
or
exactly.
yeah, it like
You know,
it
I think
just
that's
yeah.
it's also, I know you mentioned earlier that you're a parent, that you're getting ready to have another baby. Any
Hmm.
parent or anyone who's been parented, if you've had parents, you know that you're always encouraging your kids, like, try it again, practice makes perfect. No one knows how to tie their shoelaces, hit a ball, do any of these things. And we encourage our kids to do things in ways that we don't often encourage ourselves. We're willing to give our kids this sort of coaching that, yeah, you don't have to be great at it right out of the gate. You're going to get there. But,
Yeah.
oftentimes as adults, we'll be like, that didn't go well, and then never try it again, which is
Yep.
ridiculous. We have to take
Yeah.
our own coaching, and the kind of coaching that we give to our children.
Yeah, it's great. There's a saying that if you had a friend who treated you like you treat yourself, how long would you be friends with that person for? And the answer for almost everybody that I've ever met is like, I would not be friends with that person.
I'm not rooming with that horrible person.
Yeah, that horrible person. They're talking down to me all the time, and just like
That
they
inner
never have
voice
anything
in my
positive to
head.
say. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
That's so
It's
funny. I love it.
All right, so now we're going to go into something that you're not so comfortable with. So, what's something besides the Airbnb? Which, by the way, I agree with you, Mrs. Story about like, especially as a woman in New York City, like I'm comfortable having random people show up and sleep in the bedroom next to me is definitely out of most people's comfort zones, male or female. I would
Totally.
assert. I would assert. That's, if you know her, which you got to know her a little bit. Like I know her a little. I know her pretty well. Like that's actually how she is. It's pretty awesome. So what's something that is outside of your comfort zone that might be inside of somebody else's?
If you'd asked me this question a bunch of years ago, I would have said driving. For many years,
Driving.
driving, yeah, for many years, I did not drive. I am a New York City kid. I was raised in Manhattan. I didn't really learn to drive until I was in grad school when I was 30.
Yeah.
And like every time I would I would have to confess to people periodically I didn't drive, and they were always like astonished, like, how does that happen? So that would have been my answer, but I've been driving for 20 years now. So if I had to really think about something that I am super uncomfortable with that other people seem to love, I would say boats.
Boats.
I'm not like, I don't like,
Really?
kayak, boats, motorboats, sailboats. Like, I don't love them. I don't want to be on them. Um,
Wow.
I know a lot of
That's a
people
good
like,
one.
yeah, they don't get it because people, being on a boat is fun in theory. I think I'm more of a land lover. So
Yeah. Is it? Oh man, I've got so many questions. I'll only ask you a couple of them because I'm a boat lover. I love being on the water. I'm originally from Minnesota. I don't know if you remember that or not.
all the
So
lakes.
Minnesota, all the lakes. You got 14,000 of them in Minnesota. I mean, Minnesota. If you grew up in Minnesota, and we have the Mississippi River. So Minnesota is all about the water. So what is it? Do you swim?
I do swim. It's not. I don't know. It's not a fear of drowning. I mean, I'm not like the world's like strongest, best swimmer, but I definitely
Yeah.
I swim, and I actually took sailing lessons as a kid. I don't know. I
Yeah.
just feel like I don't know. I like being near land. So when you get in
Mm,
the boats,
yeah.
like everyone like wants to go out far. And last July 4th, our friends, our closest friends, have a boat. They took us around the Statue of Liberty, and like the
Yeah.
whole time, I was like crossing my fingers and like praying we were going to like make it around I have no idea. It's just a weird phobia, but I don't love the boats the way most people do.
Yeah. That is something that most people that I know really like boating or be at least being on a boat. Does this
I have,
include things
yeah.
like cruise ships?
I've never been on a cruise.
I'm
Is
not
that weird?
surprised.
Is that weird
No,
too?
I'm I haven't either. I'm not I've been on like a cruise in like Paris where you go up and down the river or in like in Manhattan, but I've never been on a cruise that you sleep in a room either. I've never done it.
I think part of the things with like cruises and boats is like you just can't do an Irish exit off of a boat.
No, you can't.
You can't Irish exit yourself off of a cruise. So like that's not for me either. It's like I need to be able to slip out the back door when I'm like done.
Oh, you're an Irish goodbyer. That's perfect. So that's something that's inside your comfort zone.
Yes.
My wife is an Irish goodbyer
Oh,
too.
I'm the master of the Irish exit. So yes, I do that
I
well.
am I'm an Irish goodbier's worst nightmare. I'm the person who's like, all right, just got to say goodbye to that person and say goodbye to that person, say goodbye to that person,
And then full
and
circle, you're saying goodbye
oh
again.
yeah, and then I'm saying goodbye again, and it just never ends. Which in earlier days, my partying days, more partying days than I do now, is like that was very apparent how that showed up for me getting home at 4 or 5 in the morning.
Exactly. But I've been saying goodbye all night.
Just been saying goodbye. Yeah, I haven't been actually talking. That's funny. All right. So this is the part of the show where Katie, like, I'd love to hear more about like your journey. Like you've shared a little bit about, originally from New York, you have a broadcast journalism degree. You've done, you shared a little bit about that. Love to just give you the opportunity to share, a little bit more about yourself, journey, and then what you're up to today.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So I've been doing communications work for about 30 plus years or so, and I started. Very sort of serendipitously. I was working on Capitol Hill when I got out of a few years after I got out of college. So when I first got
Mm-hmm.
out of college, I should start by saying I was a religious studies major, which basically
Mm-hmm.
makes you unemployable, right? No one wants to hire a religious studies major. And so when I got out of school, I wound up living and working in Japan for 2 years. I
Uh-huh.
I could speak English, and that was a marketable skill. So I promptly took it to Japan, taught English for 2 years, and absolutely loved it. Traveled around Asia for 6 months, and then I moved to back to the States, but I moved to DC. And I worked on Capitol Hill for a couple of years. I worked for a couple of senators. I worked for Don Regal from Michigan, and I wound up
Mm-hmm.
working for Senator Bill Bradley from New Jersey
Yep.
for 4 years until his retirement. And then I wound up making the leap from Capitol Hill to doing communications work at a PR firm called Edelman Public Relations, and I
Yeah.
was
It's
doing
huge. Yeah.
yeah, they're a huge global firm. I was working in their DC office. We were basically doing like public policy PR,
Yeah.
PR around like issues, for different nonprofits or for different companies that had, that needed communications work that maybe was supporting their lobbying efforts. It was all sort of policy focused. And I did that for a few years and then just got itchy, wanted to change. And I wound up going to graduate school in Washington, D.C. I went to American University
Mm-hmm.
and I got a master's in broadcast journalism. And I really fell in love with, working in a newsroom, telling news stories. I did that for a couple of years. As I said, at one point, I was working for New York One News. I was, writing the morning news. It was really very demanding. So my job would
Mm-hmm.
start at 4 a.m.
Oof.
Because by the time the anchors are rolling in at 6, after getting hair and makeup, and they're ready to give you the morning news, somebody had to write it, and that was me.
Yeah.
So writing at 4 a.m., having
Oof.
your, working on weekends, working on holidays. It was hard after a while. And I eventually made the leap to business news and worked at CNN Financial News, which had a slightly friendlier life schedule. There wasn't quite the same grind as reporting daily news shows. And New York, and don't forget, in New York, even though it was not like an ABC or CBS, New
Hmm.
York is still the number one media market in the country. New York
Sure.
One is a beloved institution, and it was demanding. I learned a lot, but I was ready for like a sleepier pace. And then I basically started doing, sort of PR work, communications work. And I did that for a number of years in different ways. I'll fast forward, through 10 years, but eventually I wanted to work for myself. And I wanted to narrow the type of communications work I was doing. Because I was writing like website copy, marketing collateral, press releases. I was really a communications person for hire, and I was writing based on my client needs. And
Hmm.
one of them eventually said, I want help with my LinkedIn. And that set me on that was the moment of serendipity that I said at the beginning
Yeah.
that put me on this path to having a company. The Reboot Group has been in business for about 6 years. I, at this point, solely do communications work for people's professional communications. It's their
Mm.
personal branding, it's their professional branding. I help you tell your story on LinkedIn. I might write your about sections of a website. I write bios, etc. And I also have a sort of a coaching element to the work that I do where I don't just help you tell your story, I then help you put it to work for you. You know,
Mm. That's
how are
cool.
you sharing it? How are you using LinkedIn to tell your story and really like advocate for whatever it is that you need? Do you want to win a new client? Do you want to get hired for a new job? Do you want to be sourced for speaking or writing opportunities? You can put LinkedIn to work for you to achieve whatever professional goal you have.
Yeah. Oh man, I have so many questions that I'm thinking about. Man, that's awesome. That's a cool journey. I'm going to ask you about early in your career. I always find it fascinating. I like I like politics. I'm interested by it, and I think I would uh, bang my head against the wall if I had to work in politics, just because I think I'm too fast moving. So I don't like bureaucracy. Um, when you were working in politics, were you ever inspired to go into politics yourself, like actually run for an office somewhere?
My father in high school encouraged me to take Spanish over French because he wanted me to deliver my mayoral acceptance speech in Spanish. Like, this was like his vision. He really was like excited for his kids to be in politics, and he ran a number of campaigns. He really lit me up about democratic politics and um, the sort of the connection between what you do as a politician and how you serve a constituency. But even though that was his sort of excitement, and I did work in politics for a number of years, when the rubber hit the road, I didn't actually want to be the front person. So I was delighted to work for somebody of Bill Bradley's talent and stature and help, further his policy initiatives. But ultimately, as I became sort of a young adult, I didn't crave that for myself.
Yeah, gotcha, gotcha. But did you enjoy working as staff for
Oh,
for
totally,
political?
totally.
Yeah, got it.
Working as part of a congressional office is really amazing. There's just like a lot of energy. There's so much talent. I mean, depending, obviously there's some members of Congress in the Senate who have zero talent themselves. So,
No.
they're obviously not being surrounded by the best. But I think if you pick the person that you're working for wisely, you're surrounded by like really amazing, talented, smart people who are and I do feel, I mean, this was a number of years ago, and politics has really changed, I think,
Yeah.
pretty dramatically. There was definitely more of a code of civility where there was just, there was a sense of decorum. There was a sense of, that you were working together as a unit, that there might be policy differences, and sometimes there were ugly political differences, but it was not the same. The tenor was very different. It
Yeah.
was not the same. I would have zero interest in working on Capitol Hill right now. I think
Yeah.
it's a tough spot, and you know, I, I'm happy that other people are willing to do it though, because we can't give up on our democracy.
No, exactly. Thanks for sharing that. My second question was about LinkedIn. So this
Hit me up.
probably won't, yeah. So this probably, I want to make an observation that LinkedIn is so interesting because when I changed from, so in July of 2019, so a little over a year ago now, I changed from being somebody who worked on LinkedIn, who worked for a large company. I worked for, I think when we were working together, I worked for a small company. Maybe we had just gone to the bigger company. I was with a company that got acquired. Small company got acquired by a big company. And when I switched from that to becoming working for myself, within a week, I was bombarded by people selling me stuff on LinkedIn. And it's still 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 times a week where people will look to sell me things like lead generation services. I work with coaches to help them this. I work with coaches to help them with that. And so the question is, and hopefully you'll give out a little freebie. I know you get paid to do this, but this is a tidbit of the work that Katie does. I'm trying to give you
Sure.
a little tidbit. What's the one piece of advice you would give to somebody, or the piece of coaching you'd give to somebody on LinkedIn to have them stand out if they're actually actively using LinkedIn to sell to other people on LinkedIn? Like for me, for example, I don't use LinkedIn for any sort of selling. Like I use it to connect with people. I use it so people can see that I'm a real person, check out like my podcast, my website, but I'm not going onto LinkedIn and like sending people messages like, hey, would you like to work together?
Right.
I'm the recipient of a lot of those.
Well, I would say,
What would,
first of all,
yeah,
Jason, if you wanted to, stop being bombarded by marketing messages, which of course, who wants to be bombarded by people selling them stuff? I would advise you to check your privacy settings. So
yeah,
you may have inadvertently given LinkedIn permission to let people market to you. And LinkedIn offers 34 different privacy filters. You can go,
yeah.
check.
Ah,
They're pretty easy to figure out. They're very like binary, yes or no. Do I want this? Yes. Do I need this? No. And I would
yeah,
look at it because I've had a client with the same issue. She was getting hundreds of marketing emails, and it turns out that she had toggled on, the option to let LinkedIn sell, her contact information, and she was being marketed to. So
oh man,
number one, check your privacy settings.
yeah,
Two, you could take your email private. Three, you could, if you're still being bothered by people, you could have a line in your about section that says, I don't accept, I don't, please don't solicit me. You can just tell people clearly that you don't want that.
yeah,
But I would say if you were interested, that's one, if you don't want to be sold to. But if you do want to be doing the selling, I would say that, and you know this as a good salesperson,
yeah,
sales are happen when there's a relationship and there's
yep,
trust. And you
yeah.
don't build a relationship by dropping into somebody's inbox and marketing to them. I have somebody who keeps marketing to me some dog stuff, and by the way, I
Nice.
did just get a rescue dog 2 weeks ago, but she was been emailing me about dogs in my email box for weeks. And I finally just, replied and said, take me off your list.
Yeah,
I'm never going to, and even though I now have a dog, I don't want to work with her because she was harassing me before and I had no dog. It absolutely made no sense. So I
that's
would say that
strange.
for any listener who is looking to win a new client or to get a piece of business, I would start by relationship building. LinkedIn's
Yeah,
a great research tool. You can see what people, um, you might research what connections you have in common. You don't even have to have a first degree connection to build a relationship. You could spend some time on their profile, seeing their activity log, seeing what they post, seeing what they share. Those are the things they care about. So you might discover that that person cares about mentoring, younger staff,
yeah,
or you might discover that person cares about COVID response for teachers and supplies. You might discover that that person cares about supporting food banks during this crisis. And that
yeah,
is your avenue to start to build rapport with them. Because it's only once you have rapport with somebody that you're ever really going to do business with them, that you're ever going to
yeah,
get hired and become a client and win budget.
yeah. I'll wrap with this part of it. I had a really funny LinkedIn thing. It must have been 6 months ago now, and I'm sure you've seen this for yourself as well. Where I don't know what system people use to do this, but it's a boilerplate, and it's like hi, and then your name, and it'll be like I'm really excited to connect with you as a fellow or as a blank, whatever your title is. And
Sure.
then it was like is like be assured that this is not an automated email, and I've actually looked at your profile, and then this signature was parenthesis insert name here parenthesis. And
That
I
is
wrote the
hilarious.
it's hilarious. I wrote them back and I said, hey, in the interest of like you as a, former salesperson, you're looking to sell things to people in my industry. You probably want to take a look at what your system you're using. I'm just giving you a heads up. Like I wasn't trolling him. I was actually like,
Sure.
you may want to
Being
take a look at
nice.
what you're doing here. Yeah, being like nice, like, hey, like honestly, man, like good for you for using LinkedIn. You may want to take a look at what you're doing because it's just not a good look for you. He did not respond to
Absolutely.
me. He did
He's
not
probably
respond to
using
me.
he's probably using Sales Navigator, but you should still be, even with using Sales Navigator and some of the automation that LinkedIn builds in for sales professionals, you still need to take the time to customize your outreach to figure out how you're dropping in like that. But Jason, I think the fact that you took time to reach out to that person is exactly what I talked about at the top of the show, that you have, an interest in people and a willingness to help them. And that kind of good karma is going to, work in your favor, even if this guy wasn't ready to, say thank you the way he should have.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, that's funny. Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. You've had a really awesome journey. We've got a lot more to talk about, and we're just going to take a really brief commercial break. We'll be right back. All right, Katie, we are back. So now, as a fellow podcast host, I'm going to give you the virtual hosting microphone, and this is your chance to ask me anything. So, Katie, what would you like to ask me?
This is exciting. Thank you for
It is.
Thank you for passing the mic. I appreciate it.
Of course.
I actually have two questions if we have time for both. But
I think we could do two. Yeah.
All right, good. So let's start with the first one. My first one, when we worked together and you were my client, you were making a leap from sales and working for somebody else, a bigger organization, to becoming your own coach and sort of hanging out your own shingle. I want to hear how that's going. And I want to hear what impacts, if any, have COVID and the pandemic had on your business.
Yes. So how it's gone for me. So I'll share a little bit about my journey, because I think that'll lend itself to the answer to the question. So I hired a coach in June of 2018 without really knowing what that was. Not really. Like I was like, oh, that coaching, I've heard of that. Like, let me give this person a shot. And through the work with her, ended up deciding that I wanted to go to a coach training program without knowing what I wanted to do with it. You're sensing a theme here about how my life goes, maybe some good and some bad.
You're like, let me leap and then look.
Right. Which the ironic thing about all this is I met my coach through an improv class. She was a teacher at my improv class. So I'm like improvising this whole thing. Like I'm literally just yes-anding things.
Jason, that was my second question, by the way. So we're going to get back to improv.
Oh, I can't wait. Oh, we'll spend the rest of the time talking about improv. So I joined the coach training program, and then it was in February of 2019, and I started to do it and actually built a nice little practice pretty quickly, which isn't all that common for people. And I think it was because I knew how to sell, which you don't really want to sell people on coaching, because if you're like selling them from like a convincing place, it's just not going to be a great energy. It's like when we work together, like, hey, like Katie, I respect you and I think you respect me. You offer something that I want. Like this is a co-created partnership. Yes, there's an exchange of time and energy and resources, but it's like a mutual thing. We're like, hey, like I'm happy to be here, versus if people, it's the old saying, like if people are quote unquote sold to or convinced, it's not usually great energy. Like most people don't like to buy things unless they feel like they have a choice in it.
Right.
And yes, we all have choices. So instead of a nice little business, and then in June of 2019, I left the company I was at. It was a big company. I don't like working at big companies. And really, like, I took about a month off when I left to kind of chill out, spend the summer hanging out. And then in July of last year, July of 19, I really like doubled down on my business and got together my first version of my website. I started to figure out, like, how did I want to market? Like, was it Instagram? Was it LinkedIn? And I really started to network. And I never really had to do that before. I don't know if this is how it was for you when you worked for other people, but when you work at least when you work in sales at a bigger company, like you don't really need to network because people know who you are. Like they know who your company is and that's what they care about. So like, because you have, you have hundreds of people in marketing.
When you work for a name brand company.
Right. A name brand company, people would go, oh, you work for blank. I want to talk to you because I know what blank is. And I've seen the marketing. You've got hundreds of people in your marketing department. When you work for yourself and and the only people who know you're in your network, I'm like, I like networking. To your point earlier, I'm a people person. I love networking. And so I'm like, oh, let me start networking. And so I started networking, joined 2 networking groups, both which I'm still a part of, which are both awesome. And have, of course, moved virtually, which makes it even easier because now we just show up on a Zoom meeting instead of having to, schlep around the city. And generated some more clients from kind of a place of kind of know what I'm doing, but kind of not. I don't know if you ever felt like this when you first started doing your own thing. I think from talking to other people, most people who have an expertise or start training something, they kind of, like, the best people that I know kind of go out and start doing it before they know how to quote unquote do it. To your point earlier about, like, you coach your kids like, oh, you don't know how to throw a ball, well, keep throwing it. Because
Right.
if you wait until you've, like, for example, completed a coach training program and have your ICF certification, all these things, you're probably never going to do it.
Yeah, you got to
Because
learn by doing.
you got to learn by doing, right? So I did that, and I actually generated a nice coaching business, and decided at the end of my coach training program that I like the work so much that I've actually gone back in, and I'm a leader in the coach training program now. So we're going into month 8 of training the next year of coaches, which is awesome. And I love it.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I love it. It's really, really cool. And so I've got that going on, and at the same time running my own business. Now, to your second part of your question around COVID, when it first hit, I didn't really have any impact on my business, and then I did lose a few clients due to economic reasons. So I actually had a client who worked in the fitness industry and had to actually close their business altogether. Like, they're out,
So
right?
rough.
Yeah, like, if you know anything about fitness, like if you know anything about, like, solopreneur fitness businesses, they're kind of, my impression is they're kind of like restaurants. They don't operate on a large cash flow. Like, they're
Sure.
operating on like a 2-week to a month long cash flow, especially if they're just getting started. So I lost a few clients there. And since then it's been slow and steady, I would say. It's been good. And the kind of clientele that I serve, the target market that I work best with are either small business owners, specifically that work in like that are on true entrepreneurs that either like own something like a fitness studio or own like a small cafe, or people who are tech people, because that's the world I come from. So
Sure.
I understand that world: sales, marketing, technology. And when I say technology, mostly people that like have a technology company, but they're more in the sales and marketing side, or like the CEOs. I coach some CEOs. And that was interesting because on the small business side, business was good. On the side, I also have another side of kind of the people I coach. They work at bigger companies like Facebook, Google, Spotify, like tech companies. A lot of those clients kind of got in a place of, I'm not going to say, what's the word? Stasis is the word I would say. So, like, not a lot of forward movement, because, and I think this is how a lot of the world has been, not a ton of forward movement, and not in a bad way, but just like, I'm not going to lose my job. Like, these big companies, they like when they publicly say I'm not getting laid off, and you're not going to get laid off. And at the same time, they'll say things like, well, we're also not doing promotions this cycle
Right.
because of, there's all sorts of reasons to not do that. So I have a lot of clients who have kind of been in a place of, I would say they're like not that driven right now, which is
Yeah, I
okay
think people are.
because,
I
yeah,
think they're just trying to
yeah,
stay afloat, because when you think
right.
about, when I cast my mind back to April, I mean, I felt like all I was doing was staring at the news and like looking at my phone and saying like, what is happening to our world? And then, you were virtual schooling and you were like managing getting groceries felt so difficult, and it was like starring in a zombie apocalypse movie. You were showing up with like rubber gloves and masks, and people were really freaked out. So there's been so much of just trying to keep your head above water. And if you're working with people who are parents, their options for childcare have sort of went poof too.
That's right. That's
A lot of
right.
camps closed. A lot of, you can't have grandparents babysitting as easily. Maybe you don't even want babysitters in the house at all if you're trying to keep distance. So I think that people have so much on their plates right now, just
Yeah.
managing, staying afloat, that the time for working on things like themselves or their career probably feel like a luxury.
No, totally. And I was just going to say that like coaching when you is a luxury item. It just is. It's not something that like, I think it's powerful for everybody, just like I think like therapy is powerful. But it's more of a luxury item, right? Like people have to have the additional income or see the return on investment to do it. Just like people have to say, well, my LinkedIn presence, I'm looking for a new, like it's kind of like if you're on LinkedIn, again, this is almost the same as networking in a way. And I'm curious about your thoughts on this. So if I work at a big company, does it really matter what my LinkedIn says? Does it really? I'm not probably not sharing much content. I'm probably like have my title there for customers to check me out, but it doesn't really matter if I'm working at a startup that nobody knows me or I'm working for myself. It matters greatly. So I say that for you is like, do you get a lot of clients who work at like a big company or like, hey, I really need you to step up my LinkedIn just so I have a better presence, and like they're outside of them looking for a new job. Like, do you get clients like that?
Yeah, all the time. I have a lot of clients who recognize that they need to, I mean, everyone today needs to be their own like PR person. And the average American changes jobs 12 times. So even if you're working for a really amazing blue chip company, a Google and an Apple, and that brand name is a door opener and carries a lot of weight, you don't want to rely solely on that. You need to make sure that you are communicating your story well to your clients. You want to make sure you're communicating it well to your peers, to the colleagues that you work with. If you're looking to move up within your company, you need to be spending time making sure your profile is polished. I think that having a really anemic, dusty LinkedIn profile
Yeah.
is a professional black eye. And
Oh
I'm
yeah.
always amazed. I was working with somebody recently who was in HR and hadn't spent any time on it. I mean, people are very busy running their day jobs. I get that. But if you want to be, if you're looking to work as a salesperson, if you're looking to work in HR or communications, if you can't communicate your own story and you can't take the time to polish your own profile, it makes it harder to make the case that you can do it for your company and for your clients. So I do think
That's
it's
right.
worth investing in it. The other thing I would say is that it's always easier to fix the roof when the sun is shining. So
I like that.
you don't want to wait till you're fired, right? Or like
Right.
reduction in force out of a job, because then all of a sudden you're looking at retooling your LinkedIn profile while you're feeling pretty lousy, or panicked. So I think it's better to fix it when you're employed, when you're happy, when you're not really looking. So that's just your profile. But I do think even if you are at a big company and your profile is strong, some people still aren't good about putting it to work, and they're not using LinkedIn to engage with their network. And think
Yeah.
about the world we're living in today. Everything is virtual. You are not bumping into your colleagues at the water cooler. I mean, sure, you're showing up on Zoom constantly, but you may not know what they're up to unless your company is built in some kind of water cooler kind of chat. You're not
Yeah.
going to conferences, so you're not seeing what your industry peers are doing, right? You're not showing up at networking events and expanding your pool. You're not seeing your clients in real life any longer. You have to see them virtually, and you have to share what you're doing with your network virtually. And LinkedIn is the perfect tool for doing that. It's the OG, virtual connection tool.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. All right. Well, thank you for the question. I like sharing that story. And now I am very excited to hear about the second question that you gave me a
This,
little sneak preview on.
yes, the sneak preview was improv. And I remember you tell you this stuck in my mind, talking about weird things that you remember 2 years later. But
Yeah.
when we worked together, you shared that you were doing improv classes. And the reason why I think it like embedded in my brain is that I've always been curious about improv. And
Hmm.
you shared the place that you're doing it in the city. I realized I'm on Long Island. I have 3 kids, 20 to 13. I could not make the commitment to getting into the city regularly, but
Yeah.
I did do improv on Long Island locally. I absolutely adored it. And so my
Nice.
question for you is, did you stick with it? And
I,
can you do it virtually anywhere? What do
oh
you
my
know about
God.
that?
I love that. Katie, I love this question. And you'll find out why in a minute. I did stick with it. And so I went through People's Improv Theater, which is at 29th and 7th in Manhattan. And I went through 4 levels of classes. So I went through level 0, level 1, level 2, and level 3. And this is such the perfect question. Level 3, I did this year, and it started in January. And our show was scheduled for March 16th.
Uh-oh.
Right. So, and we were meeting on Monday nights. So it's an 8 week, 8 weeks at a time. So we did 7 weeks, and then it was like, I don't know if you remember the week of, like, I think March 12th was a Thursday.
It was
Like that
March
was,
12th. Yes, I
yeah,
remember. My
like,
daughter flew home from Scotland on March 12th. I was
oh my
panicked when
God.
she arrived. So I remember the date very well.
Oh,
I know exactly what was happening
yeah.
in the world then.
Right. Like that was the day. So we had class on Monday, and looking back now, I'm like, oh God, like 15 people doing improv in a small studio, like that was fraught with danger, because COVID was in New York at that point, for sure. Like people were getting sick. And I remember we're like, okay, so next week we have our last class on Monday and we think it's going to happen. And then our show's on Tuesday. And then that Thursday, like we got an email Friday, they're like, hey, we're canceling the last show. We're canceling the last class. And they're like,
Womp
but we're still doing the show because we're in a theater, like a small theater. And then the next day they're like, yeah, there's no show. And our teacher
JK.
was
Oh,
right, exactly. And our teacher was awesome. So he's like, well, what's to stop us from doing our last class together on a virtual meeting? Would anybody be interested? And like all 15 of us were like, yes. So we did our last class virtually, and it was really fun. I was very doubtful because, as you know, there's such a like
sure.
energy that's
Physical.
transferred,
Right.
physical and like prop work. It was really, really fun. It was actually, in a way, removing those things and having to rely solely on your eyes and your ears and your mouth and like your speaking. It was really, we had a blast. We did a 3-hour class on Zoom, and it was really, really fun. So the answer is
Nice.
yes. And a pitch
It's
for the
possible.
and yeah, well, a pitch for the Pit, People's Improv Theater. They're running. I believe they're still running the intro class virtually now. So it's
Ooh,
4 weeks, like a couple $100, and you get on Zoom with some other people who don't know anything about improv and just have fun with it.
I love
I'm
it.
I'm I'm
Checking that out.
yeah, I'm excited to hear that you went and took it on, because remember we talked about that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I just did it. It was a one night thing. I organized it with 8 friends in town, and I know an improv coach, and she did it, but it was just sort of like a one and done. And I would love to pursue it. So I'm going to check out People's Improv Theater. Thank you.
Yes, that's super cool. Yeah, they have stand-up classes. They have a bunch of stuff that they still offer virtually. Good question. All right. I'm going to snatch the mic back from you
Go for it.
because I have my show. Kidding. No, thank you. Those are great questions, Katie. All right. So Katie, what are you most passionate about?
That is like, at different points, it's different things, but I would say, if I had to drill down and just pick one, obviously would be my kids. They are the reason why I get out of bed in the morning. They are just, nonstop inspiration. I have a 20-year-old who goes to school in Scotland. That's where she's studying for 4 years, a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old. And they teach me something new every time I engage with them. My middle guy, who's a senior in high school, when the Black Lives Matter movement really kind of re-entered our consciousness over the past few
Mm-hmm.
months, he's had this reading list that he's reading about Black Marxists. It's just so interesting. He's so informed. He is teaching me things that I should have been taught a long time ago.
Yeah.
My 13-year-old is so into art. He's so kind. He's been amazing with our new puppy. My kids they are my world and very special. And I guess I'm passionate about them and passionate about making sure that we're leaving our kids the world that they deserve.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. What's one thing you've learned from the one who's working on the BLM stuff?
Well, one of the things I've learned is that I really need to do my own work. So
Yes.
he's been good about sort of catching me up. But he's been reminding me that all this information is out there,
Yep.
and I need to spend some time learning more about the history of our country and all the stuff that we were taught and weren't taught, and I need to put the work in. And I'm actually really interested. I haven't been able to do it yet, but I want to. An educator named Rachel Cargill has something called the Great Unlearn, and it's a program about sort of unlearning what you've been taught about the sort of sanitized version of American history,
Yep.
and learning a more accurate representation of our history, because we're not going to get anywhere if we continue to sweep things under the rug and just that hope that things are okay or will straighten themselves out. Like, we have to put the work in. So that's what I've learned from him is like,
Yeah.
he's happy to tell me things, but he's like, Mom, like catch yourself up. And it's good advice.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I would love to trade resources with you offline. I just did something that I think you'll find really valuable as well that I'll share with you offline about
Thank you.
this. And I'd love to hear what that is too. So the next question, I have a feeling I know the answer already, but I'm going to ask you anyway because I think you kind of already answered it for us. But Katie, what's the thing you're most proud of?
My kids.
Wow, shocked to hear that.
My kids, totally, my kids. I remember years ago reading I think it was a Madonna quote, who said something like, if you can't be proud of your kids, what's the point? And I totally agree. They're the sun and the moon and the stars. So that's what I'm most proud of.
Yeah. For somebody who has a younger child with a child on the way, what advice would you give to me and any listener out there who's either thinking of becoming a parent or is parents of younger children? What advice comes to mind for you?
I would say that this too shall pass. Honestly, it's
Yeah.
you'd had one of the pre-questions you sent me was about maybe like what kind of piece of advice would you give on a Post-it note, and
Yeah.
this too shall pass sprang to my mind because it's seen me through some dark days when the kids aren't sleeping. Maybe you were
Mm-hmm.
running into, inevitable challenges of young kids, getting them toilet trained or problems with school or, teenage vodka drinking or whatever it is.
Uh-oh.
And you're
Uh-oh.
like, this too shall pass. Like, you're going to get through it. You're definitely going to get through this moment in time. It's only a moment. But the reason why that would be my advice is it's a two-sided coin. This too shall pass. That those baby days will not be here forever.
Yeah.
The time when your kids live with you under your own roof, when you know where they are on a Saturday night, it's going to pass too. So it's good advice for getting through the dark days, but it's also really good advice for remembering to be really present about what's so beautiful and special about the moment of time that you're in.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm just thinking about that. Have you trained your kids on the Irish goodbye yet? That's a key thing.
Yeah, I'm working on stuff like, no teenage vodka drinking and,
Yeah.
and saying goodbye. It's actually saying goodbye to your grandparents and stuff. So different, different rules. They'll figure that one out on their own.
Yeah. Or maybe they'll decide that they are not an Irish goodbye.
Yeah, that's true.
Or a Scottish goodbye. I don't know if your daughter's in Scotland. Maybe it's kind of.
They could have their own version of it. I have no idea. It probably involves like haggis and a kilt.
I love that. All right. So, Katie, what's something you're afraid that might actually be true about you?
This question was really hard when I saw it on a list of things that you suggested that I think about. And when I really sat with it for a little bit, I realized what I'm afraid might be true is that I'm not always as open-minded as I would like to be. And
Oh, wow.
My husband and I have been trying to raise our kids to be open-minded, to, put yourself in another's shoes. We are in a moment of time in our country that requires us to put ourselves in other people's shoes and to be open-minded about their experiences and their point of view and their perspective. And what I'm afraid might be true is that I'm not able to do that because a lot of what I see makes me so angry. The way, I want to keep this a Trump-free zone, but the way that I see people talking about other Americans and behaving towards the people that we all, live side by side with really enrages me. So what I'm afraid might be true is that I'm not as open-minded or not as able to give that sort of grace to people that I really should.
Yeah. I mean, I think that resonates. That resonates for me as well, for sure. It's like, oh, it's all good. I'm open-minded, but I'm like, am I really?
Right? Because there's some judgment. I got some judgment, and I got I've got some anger about what I'm seeing, and it makes it hard for me to be open-minded.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. So, as we start to wrap up for today, what would you say your your general philosophy on life is? And you've been weaving this throughout the whole conversation, but how would you summarize your general philosophy on life?
I'm going to steal this one from Warren Zevon. It's enjoy every sandwich. Enjoy every sandwich. Just be present and enjoy the. I think COVID has taught us that.
Yeah,
I took a lot for granted. The ability to like hug my parents, to
yeah,
hop on an airplane, to walk through a crowd and not give it a second thought. So
I remember those days.
totally. And I was recently like trying to unearth a picture on my phone, and it made me so sad as I scrolled through like photos of
Oh,
me like draped around my friends at a restaurant, kind of like all
yeah.
smiling together in a crowded New York City restaurant.
Oh
So
my God.
I miss those days. So
Yeah,
enjoy every sandwich. You have to be present and be grateful.
yeah. Actually, have another question for you related to this. What's been the best thing about this pandemic for you and your family?
Without a question, the sort of extra borrowed time that we've had with our kids.
Hmm.
My daughter came home on March 12th, and she did not go back to Scotland until September. And we
Yeah,
had we had months with her that we wouldn't have had, that she would have been at school. We had months of time with her brothers in ways like our schedules freed up. I mean, we were very busy with certain things like,
yeah,
trying to find masks, and we were like Cloroxing our groceries and, panicking.
yeah,
But we also had so many family meals. We did, just like hilarious baking, just baking challenges, just weird stuff to like pass the time. And it was without one shred of doubt. And spending this time with my kids in this unexpected way, and because my husband and I felt so strongly that we needed to give them joy, and not have this period of time just show up like this dark cloud of despair, that we really
yeah,
worked hard to inject some joy into it.
yeah. Nice. That's awesome. All right. Is there anything else that's popped into your mind as we've gone through this today, either that I've said or that you've said, or just at this point, anything else that you want to share with the audience?
I love this conversation. It was really fun to reconnect with you, Jason. You asked such
Yeah.
interesting questions, and I would say to anyone who's listening who is over 50, who wants to tune into my podcast, I'd love to see you there. It's
Yeah.
something I'm really excited about, and listeners, careful listeners may hear a few of your questions on one of my next shows, because
Oh, there you go.
you asked terrific questions.
Well, just in full transparency, and you know this from being a journalist, like I'm not making this up over here. Like I've taken some of these questions are coaching questions. Some of these questions, the first question is what's something you nerd out about, was given to me as a gift. Like I didn't steal it. It's one of my clients who used to have a podcast, and she's like, you should ask this question on your podcast. She's been a guest in here. I'm not going to out her, but you know who you are if you're listening. Thank you. And she's like, you should ask this in your podcast. It's perfect as the opener. So like, we're always taking things we like from other people. It's just the way it goes. So Katie, can you remind us what the name of the podcast is?
Yes, absolutely. The show is called A Certain Age. It's a series for women on life after 50. We talk career, money, wellness, health, purpose, books, fashion, fun. It's a total blast. If listeners are interested in finding me, I'm on Instagram at A Certain Age Pod, and my
Nice.
website launching at the end of the week is acertainagepod.com.
Very nice. And I will make sure to put that all in the show notes, for I'm sure people want to listen and connect. Again, I will have my mom listen because she is in your target market. I feel like it.
Yay.
I will listen to support you, but I'll be like, wait, what? This is not
Right. You're
resonating.
like,
Maybe
wait, what is it?
wait,
Yes.
what?
But
A
spread the word.
menopause? What? Yeah, yeah. No, I don't know. Like,
Exactly. Exactly. But it's, if you're, I think a lot of the content's actually good for 40, 45 plus, because a lot of the issues are things that women will be grappling with. And some of,
yeah,
I talked to a career consultant. I talked to a journalist who's written 14 books on women and money. She talks about
wow,
finance, how to deal with divorce, just like fascinating topics. I have a former Vogue editor who talks about sort of building a capsule wardrobe and cleaning out your closet and the most yummy sweaters for fall. So some of the content is appropriate for anyone, but the bent is slightly, rocking your 50s.
Yeah, I have the perfect guest for you that I'm going to share with you afterwards. Perfect guest for you. You two are going to get along so well. She was on my podcast. I'll introduce you. You're going to love her.
I love it. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, she's perfect. Yeah. All right. So, Katie, last thing, words of wisdom. You've already said it once. Let's say it one more time. What would you like to leave us all with in terms of your words of wisdom?
Rather than this too shall pass, I'm going to end with enjoy every sandwich. And you can link to Warren Zevon in the show notes too.
Yeah, no, I will. Enjoy every sandwich, Lauren Zevon. Katie, thank you so much. It was really awesome to connect with you, have a conversation with you. Good luck on the podcast. Good luck with everything you're up to. And again, for the people listening to this now and in the future, connect with Katie. Everything is in the show notes. And Katie, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Talking to Cool People with Jason Frizzell. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook and give us a shout out or take a moment to leave a review on iTunes. If something from today's episode piqued your interest and you'd like to connect, email us at podcast@jasonfrizzell.com. We love hearing from our listeners because you're cool people too.